Waitress nearly lost her life. Saving a child. Hours later, 150 billionaires. Hell's angels surrounded the courtroom. What if the quietest person in a room was the one who risked everything to save a stranger's child? The storm outside rattled the diner windows that night, but inside it was warm with chatter and clinking forks. Lena Keller, 34, moved quickly between tables, pouring coffee with the rhythm of someone who had learned long ago not to think about her aching feet. Life for her was survival. Cover the rent, keep her mother's medicine cabinet full, stretch tips as far as they'd go. She was clearing a booth when it happened. A scream that sliced through the noise. A little boy, no older than 8, clawed at his throat, his face turning pale. His mother's desperate cry froze the room, but no one moved. Lena did. She dropped everything, wrapped her arms around the child, and pulled with all her strength. Once, twice, again, until at last a piece of food shot free and clattered to the floor. The boy gasped, alive. Relief washed the room, but before she could breathe, pain ripped through her ribs. She staggered, tried to steady herself, and collapsed, falling into the arms of a stranger whose steady eyes would soon lead her into a world she never imagined. Where are you watching from tonight? The diner wasn't fancy, but it carried a kind of comfort people came back for. A neon sign buzzed outside, promising coffee that never ran out, and inside, the cracked vinyl booths held stories of decades gone by. Lena had been working here for 3 years, ever since her divorce left her with bills she could barely pay and a mother who needed daily medication. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and steady was survival. That night the storm drove half the town inside. Truckers shrugged off wet jackets, teenagers in jerseys still laughed from a football win, and elderly couples shared pie the way they had for years. The noise and warmth made Lena forget, for a while, the gnawing in her back and the weight of overdue rent. Then came the scream. The boy's tiny frame jerked in his chair, his lips turning blue. His mother's hands trembled uselessly against his back, her sob echoing through the diner. People froze, eyes wide, but no one acted. Lena's body did. She rushed forward, pulled him against her, and pressed with all the strength she had. The seconds stretched painfully, her own ribs aching, until at last the obstruction flew out. The boy gasped and coughed, his mother collapsing into sobs of relief. The diner erupted in cheers, but Lena barely heard them. Pain stabbed through her chest, sharp and unrelenting. She staggered, insisting she was fine, though her vision blurred. The world tilted sideways. She tried to grip the counter, but missed. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. A man's voice, low and firm, broke through the noise. "Don't move. Help is coming." Through the haze, she saw his face. Not a trucker, not a local. His dark coat was pressed, his shoes polished, his gaze steady in a way that unsettled her. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but the darkness pressed harder. By the time the ambulance came, the boy was safe in his mother's arms. Lena, though, lay unconscious, carried into the night with her hand dangling at her side. When she woke, the sterile white of the hospital ceiling greeted her. A nurse explained her ribs were cracked, but she'd recover. The boy was fine. His family had asked about her. Then the nurse added, almost casually, "There's a man here. Says his name's Mason. He hasn't left the waiting room all night." The name meant nothing to Lena. Her world was small. Co-workers, regulars, her mother. She didn't know any Mason. But when the door opened and the man from the diner stepped in, something inside her stirred. He carried himself with quiet authority, his coat still neat, his eyes steady yet shadowed. He reached into his pocket and placed something wrapped in tissue on her blanket. "You dropped this," he said. Her fingers unwrapped it and found her silver locket, the one she thought she'd lost in the chaos. Inside, her father's photograph smiled up at her. She blinked back sudden tears. "Thank you. This means everything." Mason studied her quietly. "You don't remember me, but years ago you showed kindness to someone you didn't know. It mattered. Last night you reminded me what courage looks like." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I just did what anyone would. His faint smile held no mockery. "Not anyone. And you'll see soon enough that your choice reached further than you realize." He left before she could ask more, his presence lingering heavier than silence. The next morning, as Lena sat by her window, the growl of engines rose outside the hospital. She pulled back the curtain and froze. The street was filled with motorcycles, black cars, and figures who didn't belong together. Bikers in leather, billionaires in tailored suits, and somehow, impossibly, they were waiting for her. Lena woke to the rhythmic beep of machines and the sting of pain that spread through her ribs like fire. For a moment she couldn't remember why she was here. Then the memory crashed back. The boy, choking, the Heimlich, the relief, then darkness swallowing her whole. She tried to sit up, groaning. A nurse hurried over, adjusting her pillows. "Don't push yourself. 3 cracked ribs. You'll heal, but it'll take time." The boy, Lena's voice was raspy. "He's fine," the nurse said with a smile. "Healthy, safe, his family's grateful. They've been asking for you. And someone else has too. Said his name's Mason. He's been in the waiting room all night." The name meant nothing. Lena didn't know anyone outside her small circle. But when the door opened and the man from the diner stepped in, she recognized him instantly. His coat was still pressed, his shoes polished, but it was his eyes, dark, steady, carrying a weight that unsettled her most. He gave a small nod. "Miss Keller, I just wanted to be sure you were all right. You caught me when I fell," she said softly. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "Mason." He pulled a small bundle from his pocket and placed it on her blanket. "This was on the diner floor. Thought you'd want it back." Her fingers unwrapped the tissue, and there it was. Her silver locket, scratched but intact. She flipped it open, and her father's smiling face looked back at her. Tears stung her eyes. "I thought I'd lost this forever." Mason's voice was quieter now. "You don't remember me, but I remember you. Years ago, I was here on a night when no one spoke to me. You brought coffee, asked if I was all right. That kindness stayed with me. Last night you reminded me again." Lena blinked, overwhelmed. I don't remember. I've served so many people." "I didn't expect you to," Mason said. "But it matters. Small kindnesses always do." He started to leave, but she stopped him. "Why do you care so much about a stranger saving a child?" His eyes met hers, shadowed with something she couldn't place. "Because I've spent too many years in rooms full of people who wouldn't lift a finger for anyone but themselves. What you did, it gives me hope." Before she could press further, he slipped out, leaving her with more questions than answers. The next morning, Lena tried to distract herself with TV, but the low rumble of engines pulled her attention. She limped to the window and froze. The hospital street was packed, rows of motorcycles gleaming under the gray sky, their riders in leather vests marked with bold insignias. Among them, sleek black cars lined the curb, polished so bright they reflected the clouds. Men in tailored suits stepped out, women glittered with diamonds, their guarded expressions watching the hospital doors. Lena's stomach dropped. These weren't her people. They weren't from her world at all. Moments later, Mason entered her room again. His presence, as calm as the storm outside, was loud. "Don't be afraid," he said. "They're here because of you." Her chest tightened. "Me? Why?" "You saved a boy, Lena, but not just any boy. Judge Halverson's grandson." She blinked, stunned. "The judge? I didn't even know. That's exactly why it matters," Mason said. "You acted without motive." And that act rippled. The judge has enemies, powerful ones. What you did drew attention, both good and bad. These people outside, they came because your courage woke something in them. Her ribs ached as she sank back onto the bed. A waitress saving a judge's grandson? Billionaires and bikers gathering outside because of her? It was absurd. Yet, when she looked into Mason's eyes, she knew it was real, and somewhere deep down she sensed this was only the beginning. By morning, the hospital felt less like a place of healing and more like a cage. Lena shifted against the pillows, her ribs aching with every breath while the sound of engines outside never stopped. Nurses peeked into her room with curious eyes, whispering in the hall. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a spectacle. When the door finally opened, the room filled with a presence she had never imagined. Men in sharp suits and women wrapped in silk, their jewels glittering against the sterile white walls. Alongside them stood bikers with weathered faces, leather vests stitched with patches, their tattoos telling lives of roads and battles. It was a collision of worlds that had no business standing together. Yet here they were, all watching her. Mason stepped forward, calm as ever. "Lena, don't be alarmed. They came to see you." Her throat tightened. "Why? I don't know them." "I'm nobody." A scarred biker spoke first, his voice deep but not unkind. "You're somebody now. You saved a judge's grandson. That changes everything." She shook her head, clutching her blanket tighter. "I didn't save him because of who he was. I didn't even know." "That's what makes it matter," Mason said firmly. "Most people hesitate. You didn't." The room fell quiet. Lena's fingers closed around her locket, the photo of her father pressing into her palm. His voice echoed in her memory. "If you can help, you do." But looking around at the powerful stranger studying her, she felt less like a hero and more like a pawn. Finally, a woman in pearls leaned closer. "Tell us, Lena, why didn't you stop? Even with pain tearing through your ribs?" Her voice cracked, but she answered. "Because a child couldn't breathe. My dad raised me to believe you don't wait for someone else. You step in." That's it. For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Some of the bikers looked away, visibly moved, and even the polished billionaires shifted uncomfortably. Lena realized her words had struck deeper than she intended. Mason nodded. "And that's why you matter now." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But you need to understand, by saving that boy, you disrupted more than one life. The judge has enemies who wanted him broken. Last night their plan failed because of you. That means you're in this, whether you chose it or not." Fear crawled through her chest. "So I put myself in danger?" "Yes," Mason admitted. "But you're not alone anymore." Tears burned her eyes, frustration spilling out. "I didn't ask for this. I just did what anyone should have done." The scarred man leaned forward, softer this time. "And that's why it hit so hard. Because in a world where most look away, you didn't." Her ribs throbbed as she sank back against the pillows. She wanted her quiet life back, her shifts at the diner, her evenings with her mother in their small apartment. But, as Mason's gaze held hers, she understood the truth. There was no going back. "You'll be asked to testify," Mason said quietly. "Not just as a waitress, but as the woman who saved Judge Halverson's grandson. Your voice could tip the scales. It won't be easy. It will put you in the line of fire. But it could change everything." Lena's breath shook. Testify? In court? The thought of sitting in front of strangers speaking about that night terrified her more than cracked ribs ever could. She closed her eyes, whispering almost to herself. "I just wanted to help." Mason's tone softened. "And that's why you're the one who can." For the first time since that night in the diner, Lena felt the full weight of her choice. It had saved a child, but it might cost her everything else. Have you ever faced a moment where doing the right thing carried a price? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and paper, the kind of scent that carried both authority and fear. Lena had never stepped inside one before. Her ribs ached under the tight bandage as she walked down the long hallway, Mason by her side, his steps steady, his expression unreadable. Outside, engines rumbled. Through the tall windows she glimpsed them, the endless rows of motorcycles gleaming in the daylight, riders waiting like sentinels. Parked beside them were luxury cars, their drivers in sharp suits, their faces familiar from magazines and news clips. Two worlds that had never belonged together now stood shoulder to shoulder, united by one simple act of courage. Lena's knees nearly buckled. "Why are they here?" she whispered. Mason leaned close. "Because you showed them something they forgot. Decency without agenda. They've come to see it carried through." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Judge Halverson sat solemnly, his grandson safe at his side. The defendants glared from across the room, men whose power had long been whispered about in shadows. The moment Lena was called to the stand, the room shifted. She rose slowly, every step pulling at her ribs, and swore her oath with trembling hands. The prosecutor's questions came gently. "Miss Keller, can you tell us what you did that night?" Lena's voice cracked at first. "I saw a boy choking. People panicked. I remembered what my father used to tell me. If you can help, you do. So I did." She described the Heimlich, the desperate seconds, the pain ripping through her chest, and the relief when the boy gasped. Her honesty was plain, unpolished. The defense attorney pounced. "You expect us to believe you risked your own life without hesitation? Isn't it true you knew exactly whose child you were saving?" Lena lifted her chin, her voice steady now. "No, I didn't know. And it wouldn't have mattered if he were anyone else's son." He couldn't breathe. That was enough. A ripple spread through the courtroom. Even jurors shifted in their seats, struck by the clarity of her words. Then Mason was called. For the first time, Lena saw him not just as the stranger who caught her fall, but as someone deeply woven into this fight. He testified about years of corruption, about threats leveled at judges, about the cost of silence. And then, with quiet conviction, he gestured toward Lena. "She isn't wealthy. She isn't powerful. She didn't even know who the boy was, but she acted when no one else did. That's the definition of courage. And it's why this case deserves justice." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward. The jurors leaned in, the gallery murmured, even the judge's eyes softened. For a moment, Lena understood Mason's purpose. He hadn't just protected her. He'd been waiting for someone like her, a reminder that courage could come from anywhere. Hours later, the gavel fell. The verdict rang clear. The threats would not go unanswered, and the law, so often bent, would hold firm this time. When Lena stepped outside, the roar was deafening. Engines thundered, applause erupted. Bikers raised fists, billionaires clapped, strangers cheered. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Two worlds colliding in agreement over one truth, that courage mattered. She flushed, overwhelmed, clutching her locket. Mason leaned close, his voice low but certain. "They're not applauding me. They're applauding the waitress who reminded them what it means to be human." And for the first time, Lena believed him. If you've been moved by this moment, subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the power of courage. The thunder of engines faded slowly as the courthouse emptied, but their echo lingered in Lena's chest. She had never imagined her name would be cheered by strangers, much less by billionaires in silk coats and bikers in leather vests. For a woman who spent most of her days pouring coffee and scrubbing counters, it felt surreal, like waking up in a life that didn't belong to her. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, her mother waited. Wrapped in her old wool coat, she looked smaller than usual, but her eyes shone with tears. "You frightened me half to death," she whispered as Lena carefully leaned into her arms. "But I've never been prouder." Lena's ribs protested the hug, but she held on, letting her mother's familiar scent of lavender soap ground her. "I didn't mean to scare anyone, Mom. I just couldn't stand by." Mason stood a few steps away, watching silently. For the first time, his shoulders seemed lighter, as though the fight he'd been waging for years had found a new ally in her. When he finally stepped forward, his words were gentle. "The boy's family insisted on paying your medical bills." "All of them," Lena shook her head quickly. "I can't—" "Yes, you can," Mason interrupted softly. "Sometimes gratitude must be accepted. You gave without asking. Let them give back." Her fingers found the locket at her chest, her father's smile etched into the worn photograph. She felt his voice echo in her memory. "If you can help, you do." For the first time she truly understood what he meant, not just the act itself, but the ripple it left behind. The engines outside started once more, this time like a farewell song. Riders saluted with gloved hands, their bikes rolling away in disciplined lines. The billionaires followed, stepping into sleek black cars. They weren't united by wealth or power anymore. They were united by one woman's unshakable choice to act. That evening, back in her modest apartment, Lena lowered herself into her worn armchair. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the city outside and her mother's soft snoring in the other room. She leaned back, holding the locket in her hands. "I did what you taught me, Dad," she whispered. "I helped." The silence around her wasn't empty, it was full. Full of the boy's relieved laughter, of his mother's sobs of gratitude, of Mason's unwavering gaze, of applause that had nothing to do with fame and everything to do with decency. Her life hadn't magically transformed. Rent would still be due, diner shifts still waited, and her ribs still throbbed with every breath. But something inside her had shifted. She knew now that even an ordinary woman with nothing more than determination could light a fire in people who had long forgotten what courage looked like. She thought of the diner jukebox, broken for years carrying that handwritten sign, "She still dreams in music." Lena smiled faintly. Maybe that was what courage was too, acting even when the world seemed silent, believing that one note could still change the song. She closed her eyes, peace washing over her. Life wasn't about being ready for every moment. It was about answering the ones that came with heart, and she had. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more. Thank you for joining us on this journey. And with that, the chapter closed. Not in noise or spectacle, but in quiet dignity, like the final note of a melody that lingers long after it fades.
I just want to take a moment to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you. Folded hands, your love, support, likes, comments, and subscriptions mean the world to me. Without you, this journey wouldn't be possible. Every view, every share, and every encouraging word keeps me motivated to create more content for you all. I'm truly grateful to have such an amazing community by my side. Let's keep growing together and making this journey even more special. Red Heart.